Welcome to the Empowered Mothers Network podcast, supporting mothers to be the best versions of themselves. I'm Sarah and this is episode 25, and we are in the episode which is called Harnessing the Seasons of Motherhood, Lessons from Nature. So firstly, thank you very much for accompanying me to what is, I guess you could say it's a landmark episode, couldn't you? You could say that with a lot of numbers, but yeah, we've got to episode 25. And I think I restarted the podcast not quite a year ago. I think it was the beginning of this year. I'm just thinking when this podcast will go out in a few more weeks, so we should still be in 2024 when this podcast goes out. But yeah, we've got to episode 25 and we restarted, resurrected it at the beginning of the year at episode 8, I think. So for those of you who have been here for a while, thank you very much for continuing to support the podcast. As ever, we've got podcasts here on YouTube, or the audio versions available on all good podcast streaming supplies. And also we've got the EMN Journal, which is our fortnightly newsletter that goes out to your inboxes. So if you haven't subscribed to that already, please do. I'm going to talk a little bit today in this episode about some resources that can accompany this episode to help you. So I'll go in a little bit more into that in a minute, but basically there's going to be a little exercise that I'm going to guide you through briefly here on this podcast episode. And to go a little bit deeper with that, or to do it again, I'm going to produce like a guided PDF, and also maybe record an audio meditation version as well, so that you can continue to do that exercise at your own time. So those will be available for subscribers of the EMN Journal. It will get released through that once they're ready. So if you haven't already, do subscribe. You can reach us via Instagram, Facebook, or the website empoweredmothersnetwork.com. Okay, so we are talking about the seasons of motherhood. So for me, I track a few cycles in my own life, and again, I've got a blog post, I think, about the link between motherhood and cycles, and I will have to link to that. I will put that in the next journal episode when this podcast goes out, basically. And I've talked before about how I kind of personally track moon cycle and also menstrual cycle to get an overview of, where I'm at, some points of my cycle where I know my energy will be low, so I don't schedule too much in and don't take too much on and go more inside, retreat a bit. But this episode is, maybe you're not at a place where you've started tracking yet, or you follow those particular cycles. But one really simple cycle that really does mirror motherhood is that of nature and the seasons. And I really kind of noticed this through, because one of my other passions is herbal medicine and gardening, and through gardening and working with the land, where I'm at for a few years now, I've kind of really come to notice this link between the cycles, the seasonal cycles, and the cycles that we go through in motherhood. And just to clarify, for seasonal cycles, I'm just basically talking today about your spring, summer, autumn and winter, and how those seasonal phases link up with the different phases of motherhood and personal growth as well. So yeah, today firstly we'll talk a little bit about the 4 seasons and how they particularly relate to motherhood, and then we'll maybe dive a little deeper and do this sort of little reflective exercise about how you can then take those and kind of understand where and what season of motherhood life you are in at the moment. Now, I think as well there's a lot of resources out there where you can also kind of map the wheel of the year or the seasons to life as a woman overall. So you might have seen the kind of maiden mother crone archetype and that way of mapping it out, where you've got sort of spring relating to maiden, summer to mother, and then autumn going into winter to like the crone aspect, and sometimes it's like crone and hag. It depends on what resource you're accessing there, but that's sort of more of an overview of like the entire lifespan, which is also a really useful way actually to kind of map things out. But in this particular episode, we're looking more at just, where you're at now, not necessarily the whole phase of your entire life, but the cycles of where you're at the moment. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each season, and then you'll have an idea of what I mean. So we start with spring, and the biggest thing about spring is that it represents sort of new beginnings and growth in your life. So it's like a fresh start. So in terms of motherhood, that might be something like the pregnancy and the newborn phase, when you're in your childbearing years, or it might just be as simple as starting a new chapter in your life, which is why I'm sort of saying here it's not necessarily mapping out a specific part of your timeline of life in that, it's like, becoming a mother, it's spring. Becoming a mother is sort of the part of the springtime process with the newborn, but also it can be just the new beginning. So there's so many different cycles in our lives, and that's an interesting thing as well, to when you sort of track different cycles. There's so many different cycles of different things, like planets, our planet's seasons, your own cycles. There's so many cycles within cycles and cycles to track that it get a bit overwhelming to kind of track everything, but it's really useful to give you a bit of a snapshot of where you're at, if you know kind of intuitively even where you're at in different cycles. For example, somebody might be in the spring phase of the spring season of their life at this moment if they have just had a baby or they're about to give birth. They might also be in the spring phase if you might be somebody with kids who are older, but you are just starting out and embarking on a completely different career change, going from one thing to another, and that's a new beginning in your life. So you might find in that aspect of life that you are in the spring phase. So I think for the most of us, we tend to enjoy spring. It brings a lot of positivity for us, the fresh new starts, and things to look forward to. You kind of get that air of wanting to take action and get going with things and get moving again with certain parts of your life. So generally, overall, it's quite a positive, optimistic kind of season. And we often have those same sort of feelings when we're starting a new phase of our life, even if it is, something a bit unknown and terrifying on the surface. I think we've always got that kind of positivity and optimism to really run with, because we're right at the beginning and there's so much unknown. So if you were to find that you are in this spring season of life at the moment, some tips for kind of getting the best out of that and embracing and being in and okay with that season that you're in is to take the time to set intentions, especially if you're there because you're starting a new phase of life, or you're going through a transition from one phase of something into another. So setting intentions and getting a little bit of clarity on where you are going forwards. Also allowing yourself to nurture your own creativity, because that's something that's really important at this time. And also cultivating patience as well. Now that's a good one for me. So yeah, I find, especially in terms of like gardening, for example, we'll go back to that. You get to springtime and the first bit of spring, maybe the later bits of spring, things really get going in gardening, but the first bit of spring is still quite a slow time, and you're not seeing any results of what you're doing at that point. And sometimes you have to remind yourself to be patient and get ready to plant the seeds, or just start planting one or two seeds. We're not in full on seed planting mode just yet, but yeah, it's cultivating that patience of just taking it one step at a time and not trying to run or get too far ahead. And I know I do this myself as well, where you might be at the start of a new cycle and you can maybe see where you want to be further down the road, but you're not quite in that season yet, like summer, for example. And we're trying to rush ahead and push and force and take outward actions to get further along, and that sometimes can end up blocking us, actually, or just causing more issues. So again, these are sort of tips about how to be okay in what season you are in now. So ultimately, the way that we move forwards is to find acceptance in the season that we're at now. So patience is a big one for spring. Okay, let's look at summer. So summer is probably, a lot of people enjoy summer, or a lot of people thrive on summer. It's one in our culture, it's the kind of season of life that is most promoted and accepted and pushed as the narrative, so that when we are in other seasons, we maybe sometimes become a little bit disconnected and less sure of our own wisdom, because it's being pushed so much that we should be in the summer of our lives. And well, there's definitely a time and place for that. We're not always meant to be in that season. So summer represents like the peak, doesn't it, of activity and vibrancy and energy. And in terms of motherhood or life at this time, that might look like, summer can often be pretty busy. So managing busy schedules, also having things like, daily routines where you're thriving in those and everything's, happening, and you're getting your to-do list and that things are getting fired off that. It's that real kind of time of there's lots to do, but there's lots of action happening. Things are really moving forward, and also things can really change at what seems like quite fast-paced, really. There's quite a fast pace to it. So some tips for really thriving in summer would be, firstly, to celebrate wins, because this is a time, where, outwardly or inwardly or both, you're probably achieving quite a bit. There's because it's so action orientated, there's a lot of perceivable achievement associated with that season. And whilst we have to be mindful that that doesn't happen all of the time in life, I think when we are in that season of our life, then it is okay to, celebrate that. If we are getting a lot of things done, or we're making a lot of progress or headway, then there's definitely a time and a place to celebrate that. But equally, because of the fast-paced sort of look of the season, and the fact that so many things just sort of seem to keep coming one after another, we do have to be really mindful in this season that we don't get burnt out, and we don't take too much on, and we don't push too hard, because it is the time of year or the time of season of life where we can easily, if we're not careful, just go too far and burn ourselves out, say yes to too many things, stretch ourselves too thin, spin too many plates. So really being aware of burnout is something important during this season. And finally, embracing play as well. When we're doing so much, and there's so much on our to-do lists, we're being so productive, we can lose track of just taking that time to kind of not necessarily stop and rest as much as you would in, say, the winter season, but maybe just to stop and play and just have some unstructured time, whatever that looks like for you. It might be stopping and just spending some time with the kids and playing with them, or it might be indulging yourself in like a hobby that you have that maybe you've not had too much time to do recently, but just finding some way to bring a bit of sort of free-form play into your life during this period. Okay, let's look at autumn. So yeah, for me, autumn seasonally is my favourite season because I am an autumn baby. So yeah, for me it's a time I really enjoy. It's a time for reflection. We're bringing in the harvest of what we've achieved over from spring through summer. We're sort of harvesting that all in now, and then that's sort of the beginning of autumn. And then as we move more into the season, you've got things like the leaves falling off the trees, and then it becomes more from receiving and celebrating everything we've gained to then moving into that phase of letting go of everything that we now no longer need. So yeah, if you see spring as like the journey up and out, I guess then autumn would be the opposite, and then it's the journey down and in. And during like motherhood or the phases of our lives, the autumn, again, during the course of our entire lives, autumn's often portrayed as the time where we move from like motherhood into older age. So around sort of menopause time is often attributed to autumn. In terms of this little framework that we're looking at today, so autumn would maybe look like the time where your kids are growing older. They've maybe not left home yet, but they're about to, or we're getting to that sort of phase. It might again look like a shift in your career. So maybe you haven't started a new career yet like you would in the spring phase. You're not in that new beginning, but you are moving towards the end of something. So moving towards the end of a cycle, whether that's like career related or personal transformation related, but you can feel that element of you're in the letting go stage of things. So there's that celebration of what you've achieved and what you've gained, combined with then the letting go of the old and getting ready to maybe end the cycle and eventually move into another one. So as there's quite a practical element to autumn, some good tips for navigating autumn. Firstly, journaling, because then you can sort of write down, really write down everything that you have had that you want to celebrate, and then maybe looking as we sort of reach that point of shifting focus from everything that we've had to everything that we need to let go of. And then that can be sort of combined again with, being really having some kind of, I don't want to call it gratitude practice, but I can't think of another name for it. And I do need to do another podcast about gratitude and why. Yeah, that's another podcast basically. But gratitude in terms of, really sort of writing down and looking at everything that we've done or achieved or accomplished or that is good in our lives and that we are grateful in some aspect for. And the biggest thing that is great to do during the autumn phase of your life is decluttering. And that might look like physical decluttering, or maybe mental and emotional decluttering, depending on, what kind of thing you're moving through. If you're moving through like the death of a relationship, for example, or whether you're moving through the end of a career, it could look like different things, but some form of decluttering and really returning to like simplification of life. And the last one is winter, and this is what kind of inspired me to do this podcast actually today, because as I'm recording this, it's the beginning of December and we are moving into winter. And for me and a lot of other people, this is the season that I struggle with the most. Mainly probably because I've been grown up in such a culture of, doing stuff outwardly and really achieving things. And I've always found, like, it's just grim as well. Like in the garden, there's nothing really a lot to do at the moment. Everything has pretty much died back, other than looking after the soil, which is an important job. But there's nothing to show, there's nothing outward to really say, hey, look, I did that. It's just like bare earth, and it can be, because of like the way society is and the focus on everything external and outward, we often can really struggle with this month. And then you've got the lack of light as well. So anyway, I don't need to go on about the perils of winter, but a lot of us find it quite a difficult time, and that often reflects mentally and emotionally through us. So that often is because we're still trying to be in another season that we're not in, and ultimately we can't control the seasons we can't control the earth seasons as much as we can't control so much the seasons of our life. So winter represents like the rest time, the introspection, going within, the renewal as well. So you're between that point of autumn where you've kind of come downwards and inwards, and then you've got spring where you're going up and out, but that's kind of like a U shape, if you will, and you're at the bottom of the U in winter. You're at the bottom where you're not really moving in a way, and it might feel like that in your life. You might start feeling a bit like feeling stuck, or just feeling really burned out if you've overdone it during the summer phases of your life. Or it's just that transitional phase where, things can just either slow down ridiculously or just completely come to a stop. And again, I can feel that personally at the moment in terms of the actual season is the slowing down, and part of me wants to get going with things and take actions on things, but intuitively I know that it is this time to kind of slow down and stop. And there's a lot of resistance to that. I find that myself, and a lot of people have resistance to it as well. I know it's a difficult time. So those are sort of some of the aspects of your life where you might, be in the middle of a transition, but you're at the darkest, the stopping point where you just have to stop and rest, and you can't actually forge forward at this point. You can't go backwards, you can't go forwards. So the tips, I guess, for like embracing the winter periods of your life, which I know is probably the very hardest to do, is again really leaning into this idea of rest that we do so struggle with, like deep rest and self-care that doesn't look really trite, kind of commercialised self-care, but really being compassionate with ourselves on every level, and really taking care of ourselves kind of through food, through movement, through connection as well. So although it's quite an introspective time, and then some of us naturally will want to go within and want to be alone, but at the same time we do need to probably seek out some connection, because we can go too far in our shells, if you will, and become quite isolated, and that's when loneliness can really just sort of creep in when we least expect it, and that can really cause some issues. Then we can either end up getting, really fighting the season we're in, or getting that absorbed into it that we cannot then come out of the other end when it is time and it is ready for us to move into spring. We may then have issues with coming out the other side. So actually seeking some kind of connection with other people is really useful at this phase as well, even if we don't feel like it. So just from that brief overview, we might have got a bit of an idea of where you're at, like what season of life you're in. And I think, we can cycle through these depending on the aspect of life. Sometimes an aspect of our life will cycle through them at quite a fast rate, and we we'll find out actually I wasn't in the winter phase of it for very long. Whereas some aspects of our life, if you want to then zoom out and map it back to the aspects of your entire life, then you're in some seasons for quite a long time. Kind of being curious to what season you're in, and then maybe working out where that is and observing it without too much judgment. And using small rituals as well to really kind of get in the present moment and find that acceptance of where you're at. So again, if you are interested in something like gardening or working with the land or the earth in some ways, that can really help connect you to the actual earth seasons, and that can be a really useful tool in self-growth as well, and inner reflection. And then also you might want to take it a bit further and teach your own children, for example, about the seasonal cycles and rhythms, and apply the lessons as a family as well. So it might, during the summertime, that's when you'd be doing things together as a family and getting out there and doing stuff. And then perhaps winter is a time where we then have to come to this place where we accept the rest and the self-care, and maybe we kind of have to model that as well for the rest of our family, because often we're getting into this winter phase, but it's also seasonally, it's also a bloody busy time because we've got things like Christmas going on, and if you have kids at school, it's just insane at the moment with the amount of stuff that's going on. So we can quite easily get burned out because we're still trying to do all this stuff and we should be kind of winding it down. So if we can model that for our kids as well, and the rest of our family, and kind of encourage them that it's normal to have these different approaches to life, if you will, depending on where we're at, then that's a good thing. Okay, so I promised at the beginning of this episode we do a little reflection exercise so that you can kind of figure out what season of life you are in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type all this up as a PDF and probably as an audio meditation as well, and I'll share that with subscribers to the journal. But for now, I'm just going to run through it on the podcast episode as well, so you can just use this just to kind of get a bit of clarity about what season you're in, and then maybe from there you can work out a little bit more, whether there's some parts of your life you need to change a little bit, or you need to do a bit of decluttering, or you need to really take action on something that's been brewing in your mind for a while. So firstly, to do this exercise, again, if you want to do it with the meditation, then set yourself up as you would for meditation, and I will, as soon as that meditation is available, I will share that out. And it's probably useful to get something to write with, so like if you've got a journal that you write reflectively in, or just a piece of paper or something in case you need it, and just to really prepare yourself as you would for meditation and kind of get present. And then we've got some questions that we can ask, and then you can just kind of write down the first thing that comes to mind without trying to kind of sit there and edit yourself. Just kind of write down the first thing that comes to you. So we'd think about spring first, new beginnings and growth. So if you ask yourself, what feels new or fresh in my life right now? Am I planting seeds for something I want to grow? And what excites me about this phase, and what challenges do I face? So if you write down a little bit about each of those questions for spring, and then we'll do all 4 seasons, and then we can kind of get a bit of a snapshot of where you're at yourself. So that's spring. So summer, which is about energy and vibrancy. So summer, what areas of my life feel busy or full? Where am I thriving, and where am I feeling overextended? And how can I bring more joy or play into my daily routine? So then moving into autumn, which is harvest and reflection, what am I proud of that I've accomplished recently? Is there anything I need to release or let go of to move forward? And how can I show gratitude for what I've gained in this season? And winter, rest and renewal. Am I feeling the need to slow down or rest? What emotions or thoughts keep surfacing for me? How can I nurture myself and embrace stillness in this phase? Okay, so those are all the questions, and again, I'll get the print out so you can refer back to them. But based on your reflections of maybe what you've written down to those questions, then just read them back over and see which season feels kind of most aligned for where you're at in your life right now. You know, many times that might actually tally up with the season or time that we're in. So if we're in winter, you might feel like you're in a winter phase of your life at the moment. Then again, you might be in a different phase. You might be in an opposing phase, or you might just be in a different phase altogether. You might have different aspects of your life, like career or family or relationships, that all sort of maybe have different seasons within cycles. And then if you write down one word or phrase that captures the essence of your season that you feel primarily that you're in right now, the one that sort of stands out to you the most. So the final thing for this bit is that we create an intention for the season that we're in. So if you can think of one intention or action to really kind of sum up or reflect this phase of your life. So I've got some examples here. So say if you feel like you're in the spring phase of your life, you might write something down like, I will nurture my creativity by starting a new hobby. If you're in the summer phase, you might say something like, I will celebrate my wins by sharing them with my loved ones. If you're in autumn, you might say, I will let go of guilt by saying no to things that drain me. If you're in the winter phase, you might say, I will create space for rest by taking like a 10-minute break daily, or finding 10 minutes where I can just really work on, or not work, on being present. So if you come up with an intention like this, then try and keep it visible for the duration really of how long you feel like you're in this season. So to do that, we'd probably revisit the exercise again, either every month or every quarter, every couple of months really, if you come back to the exercise and see, ask yourself the same sort of questions and see if your kind of season has shifted. And then if it has, you'd like then realign your actions accordingly and maybe, tilt where you're going to go. So yeah, looking at the seasons of your life can be a really interesting and a nice little reflective exercise to do. And I'm going to probably sit down and do it a bit. I have a bit of an idea already of what season of life I'm in. And for me, I think, it's tallying up the winter thing, as I'm feeling really called to really slow down and rest at the moment. And I've got a lot of new ideas percolating because I'm kind of at the end of a cycle, but I'm very aware I'm not quite, I don't know, it doesn't feel like the right timing just to start the new one just yet. So for me personally, I do feel like I'm kind of lined up with seasonally, and I'm getting sort of into this little winter phase at the moment. But again, it's different for everybody, and you might have sort of a few different ones depending on different areas of your life. If you have done this exercise, then let me know what sort of season of life you're in at the moment, and if you think you could share as well how you came to that conclusion that you're in that period of your life, or if you have any tips for navigating certain seasons of your life, or if you have any stories at all or thoughts, then feel free to share them either in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can share them via email. So that would be sarah@empoweredmothersnetwork.com, or on social media on our Facebook or Instagram page, and you can share them there. And I think I will get this meditation and the sort of the questions written down in PDF format. And when they're released, I will let you know via the journal, and then they can be accessed as well for whenever you want to do this exercise going forwards. And then, yeah, I think that's it for this podcast episode. I think next time we're going to be diving into a bit of no. So we'll be diving into how saying no can be an act of empowerment and not selfishness, and maybe looking a little bit more about setting boundaries. Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions or comments, then please share them. Otherwise, I will see you for the next podcast episode.